The ancient city of Petra, with its hidden desert location and its massive buildings carved into entire cliffs and mountains, is without a doubt one of the most fantastical and mysterious things that our ancestors have left us. And while people have been wondering about the origins and history of the city for thousands of years, it is only now that we have slowly started to understand the truth behind the lost city. And let's just say that some of the things that scientists have uncovered have the potential to change the way you look at not only Petra, but all ancient cities. So, without wasting any more time, let's get into some of the latest secrets scientists have uncovered about Petra and what they mean for the ancient city. But first, let's talk about the city's mythical origins. Located in the heart of the Middle Eastern desert in modern-day Jordan, Petra has fascinated tourists, historians, and Hollywood movie producers ever since people relearned its existence in the early 19th century. That's right, relearned. You see, while the city was common knowledge for most of ancient history, sometime around the 1300s, the city was abandoned for reasons no one is really sure about. And in the subsequent centuries, most people besides the local tribes forgot it even existed in the first place. But before all of that happened, the city was one of the most important and prosperous trade centers of the ancient world. You see, the city was the capital and home of an ancient Arabic civilization known as the Nabateans, who at their peak ruled over much of modern-day Jordan, Syria, and Israel, as well as parts of Saudi Arabia. And even back then, they were famous across the ancient world for their skill in architecture and engineering. In fact, as a Bronze Age civilization, the Nabateans existed alongside many of the other famous ancient nations, like ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, as well as the Babylonian and Assyrian empires, and is situated on the trade routes between those ancient powers. The Nabateans became a very important trade hub. They got so successful that they decided to build a city that showed their skill while also being incredibly well defended. And that's how Petra came into being. Built sometime around 600 BCE, the city preceded the Athenian Acropolis of ancient Greece by almost 2 centuries, and the Roman Empire by half a millennium, but at the time was just as important and powerful. One of the things that kept Petra safe and strong for centuries without major turmoil was its geography. Situated deep within a valley of red sandstone cliffs and valleys, the city was only accessible through narrow, secret caverns that led through the cliffs, making sure no army could enter its gates. And inside, it was a whole different story. You see, the reason Petra is so famous among ancient monuments is that instead of choosing to use wood or stone to build their buildings, the Nabateans built their monuments by carving into the very cliff faces that they were surrounded by. In fact, at the city's peak, it had huge multi-story temples, monasteries, palaces, mausoleums, theaters, and even gladiatorial arenas, all carved into the landscape. And that isn't even the most impressive part. That actually goes to their water systems. As you can imagine, serving a medium-sized town in the middle of the desert before the invention of modern plumbing is not an easy task, let alone serving an entire kingdom with traders and merchants going through it every day. But somehow, the ancient Nabateans were able to carve water channels and pipes all across the desert that somehow provided clean, plentiful water to everyone in the city, allowing them to stay powerful and rich for centuries. And that is where stuff starts to change, and we get to talk about the first of the many mysteries surrounding Petra, a sudden disappearance and mythical rediscovery. You see, while the city had existed for nearly 1,000 years as a powerful economic and cultural power, suddenly, around 200 CE, the city started to decline. In fact, not only did the city and its people grow weaker, but in time, the city was actually forgotten by the world. Let's rewind a little bit. You see, around 200 CE, the city had been an important part of the Roman Empire for a couple of centuries, and while it remained important and prosperous throughout Roman rule, Around 300 CE, almost alongside Rome, the city started to diminish. The trade started drying up, and the water system that kept the city fresh and life-sustaining for such a long time became abandoned in a matter of decades. And before the end of the 500s, the city had been basically abandoned until it was forgotten by basically everyone except for the few nomadic tribes in the region who claim to be the descendants of the ancient Nabateans, and who also keep the city's location secret to prevent looters from ruining its ancient buildings. And for the next 1,000 years, the city turned into a myth that was referred to by storytellers in folktales, like the ones described in the Arabian Nights. And for the most part, people considered it to be a myth that couldn't possibly be true. So, how was it rediscovered? Well, that's a story in itself. You see, after having heard many of the stories and rumors that were told about the ancient city, a 17th century Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt decided to look for the mythical city. He did that by taking on a Muslim name and pretending to be a Muslim scholar so he could freely travel among Arabic nomads, where he slowly started to gain their trust so they would lead him to the city. And after years of traveling through Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and eventually Jordan, he finally managed to trick some tribes into leading him to Petra, from where he reintroduced the world to the marvelous city. Now, you might think that after it had been discovered by modern archaeologists, Petra's mystery would slowly start to unravel. And while we have learned a lot about the city, there are still so many basic things that we don't know, including a secret civilization. That's right, while we spent a long part of the video about the Nabatean kingdom, the fact of the matter is, they too are just as mysterious as the city they inhabited. Not only are the origins of the Nabateans extremely vague, since they basically popped into existence around 800 BCE, but their relationship to the rest of the people in the Middle East and to the people living around the Mediterranean is also unclear. And that's nothing to say of their disappearance. Most historians assume that they gradually assimilated into the local nomadic tribes, as is claimed by them, but they suddenly shifted to such a lifestyle without leaving a trace of their civilization anywhere else is a big mystery. But none of these things are as fascinating and impressive as the geography and architecture of the city itself. Never-ending discoveries. Unlike most ancient ruins, which was known by a lot of people and as a result had their secrets pretty well known, the fact that Petra was only known by a handful of people who barely visited it means that the city and its structure was basically not understood at all. And as a side effect of that, many parts of the city haven't actually been discovered in the first place. That's right, according to many researchers, over 85% of Petra is actually hidden, buried underneath the cliffs and sands of the desert. And before you say that sounds like a conspiracy theory, this is not an unpopular opinion among modern researchers. In fact, just a few years ago, in 2016, a team of scientists discovered a megastructure larger than anything else that had been found in the city, right under their footsteps. Using modern satellite imagery, archaeologists were able to identify a massive stone platform buried under the sand that was so big that people on the ground didn't even notice it was there. Measuring almost 184 feet by 161 feet, the 2,150-year-old structure had huge flagstones, a colonnade, a large staircase, and an additional structure above it. And not only is the discovery a big deal, the fact that this had gone unnoticed makes people wonder what else the ancient city might be hiding. And if what we've discovered up till now is any indication, I'm sure that whatever we'll discover will be just as fascinating. And well, on that note, we must end today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching it, and if you did, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Click on one of the two videos on your screen right now. We'll catch you guys in the next one.